Once upon a time, there was a detestable little thing named Desmond. He was probably a human, but only in the same way that a pickle is a cucumber. Most humans have some sense of nuance or interest about them. That's what makes them such fascinating, wonderful creatures. They self-contradict and repeat mistakes and always manage to do things just a bit wrong. But no matter what, you can always expect them to stay true to themselves. Desmond was true to himself, but only in the worst ways a human could be. There was no tendency to compassion or kindness or even to fun little mistakes that would later turn into interesting dinner anecdotes. He was 1,000 shades of the same sludgy greenish-brown painted on a canvas to match. A constant piece of gum stuck to the sole of the world's shoe, resistant to being scraped. A punishment inflicted by the universe on anyone who had to pay him attention, which was almost everyone. That's why, at 11:45 sharp, on a brisk Tuesday morning in Deston, a giant public bus filled with 40 passengers and a couple sacks of cement for good measure came hurtling at him around a sharp corner! Unfortunately for all of us, Desmond looked both ways before crossing the street, so the story didn't just end there. "Not to have their license revoked," he grumbled to no one in particular. Then he started whistling that awful, horrible song about the daisies, and safely crossed the street at the crosswalk. It was sad that he chose this crosswalk in particular, because the city had recently done some road work here, so the lines were cleanly marked and there were no potholes for him to trip over. As a matter of fact, Deston's road maintenance was some of the best in the world, which was a good thing most of the time. Desmond was a perpetual pedestrian. He could have driven like a normal person, he certainly had the money, but he said that walking was good for his heart. That, combined with his diet, meant that he wasn't at risk of a heart attack or any major illnesses. He'd never been in a car crash either, even though the shock might have fixed him. There are many good people who choose to walk when they could instead drive cars. These people often have noble causes, like when they all go out with picket signs and complain about the way things are. Sometimes they believe their causes are noble, even when they really aren't, like when they all go out with picket signs and complain about the way things are. Desmond would have never walked for either of these reasons, because nobody wanted to complain about the same things as him, and also because he had so much money that he didn't need picket signs to complain. He was an evil pedestrian, and he only walked because it made him harder to kill. Eventually, Desmond arrived at another street crossing, and, as luck would have it, the death bus's route wrapped back around to meet him there. It had dropped off several of its passengers and one of the bags of cement, which meant that its load was lighter now, and it could move faster. The driver, Lazy Eye Larry, as his coworkers knew him, had lost his prescription glasses after barreling down the last turn, and now he was swerving wildly down the road, running up one curb and then the other as he fought to gain control of the wheel. One of the passengers puked, but this was a worthy sacrifice, because with all of the swerving, Desmond was no longer safe on the sidewalk. Another important thing to know about Desmond is that he always carried a .450 Willems revolver to ward off any pesky lowlifes that might try to shake him down in dark alleys, even though he never went into dark alleys because he thought they were disgusting. The revolver was 200 years old, and the bullets had to be loaded individually, but he used it anyway instead of a better gun because he thought it made him look cool. It might have made him look cool if he were some kind of cowboy, but he was not, and so it did not. But, cowboy or no, he was a good enough shot. He spun the weapon from its holster and shot the front tire of the oncoming bus, which lurched away from him as though it felt the pain of the injury. The motion was too abrupt. The bus rolled onto its side and scraped to a slow, agonizing stop, finishing only a few feet in front of Desmond. Lazy Eye Larry sat dazed in the driver's seat, held sideways by his seatbelt. "You're a miserable driver," Desmond said, stowing his revolver, "and you ought to be grateful that I've got somewhere to be, so I won't be pressing charges. Call the police and tell them what you've done." He took one look at the interior of the bus and saw faceless passengers covered in cement dust, some dead and others groaning in pain. It would be good optics for him to offer condolences, he decided. The families of the deceased would get fruit baskets, and the survivors would get a neatly wrapped package of soaps. Lazy Eye Larry, being the cause of this, would get nothing. Desmond made the proper mental notes, spun on his heel, and walked along.